All right, it's another one of these Homeric Rhapsody things. We're currently in what's known in the modern era as Book 8, and Priam just sent the his attendant Ideas to visit the Achaeans and try to make a plea bargain, but they refused. Here we go. And thus exited that godlike man Ideas, with the words of Priam and Prince Paris and Hector on his lips, bringing back the news that at least their men could be brought into the city, those fallen comrades that they all missed so dearly, even if the war could not be ended. Though, to be realistic, none of the Trojans expected that the Achaeans would take such a bargain. Though, if they had only waited another day, or 2 or 3, perhaps they would have thought differently. And so, having left the tent, the captains of the Achaeans were back to their own devices. And Nestor, son of Neleus, that Geranian horseman, who ruled over 3 generations of men, and wisely ruled, giving all his counsel to many, many of the great ones of times past, he spoke up, and he said to Agamemnon, "Yea, we have gained a treaty to bring in our dead, and so have the Trojans, and so therefore we shall have a great stalemate for the coming days, a break in the war, and a time for our men to gain a breathing space among them. But let us do our best to take in our men quickly. No tears among the Achaeans, for there is work to be done. All our men are to be identified, whatever armor is still on their bodies to be sent back to their widows and their fathers, and we shall all burn them according to tribe, giving all proper funeral rites, even if we cannot individually give ceremonies to each one. We will do our best to send the bones of each to his family, if we can, and if not, we will at least send an attendant who can tell stories of his valor. But having done this, let us not waste the time that has been given us. The Trojans will take time to pull in pyre wood from the mountains, which they do not have stores of inside the city to sufficient amounts. So they will need more time for their funeral rites, but we have already been raiding the mountains and the trees and the forests and taking all the wood we need, so we shall not require as much time for these rites. And instead, we should use that remainder of time to heap up a mound of earth on top of that funeral pyre, and use that as the base for a great rampart, for we shall build up out of wood from the trees or from any of the rotted ships that cannot any longer be used either way. We shall cut them up and use them for timber to build a giant wall that will keep out the Trojans from our camp and hopefully fend off the evil day should that wrath of Achilles ever lead the Trojans back to us." And so, hearing this, all of the Achaeans nodded their assent, and they sent out woodsmen to take in any trees that had not yet been brought down, and they sent out men to remove the corpses from the battlefield. And so Achaean and Trojan alike joined that field for the first time in a long time, not as enemies, but as friends in grief. Neither were to acknowledge each other, and neither were to shed a tear, for each had been ordered by their commanders not to show weakness on that battlefield, though many of them wept in their hearts and could not stop from shedding tears into their sleeves as they turned away from the enemy or those who were once enemies. and they pulled the men back in, and they burned them with all dues afforded them, each by his own tribe, those of the Pylians separate from those of the Argives, and those of the Salaminians, and the Ithacans, and the Cretans, and all the different contingents aside. And once they had quenched the pyres with wine, and picked out the bones, when the ashes had cooled, and put them into various jars to bring back, then the men got to work on the great project that was before them. There was no time to think, no time to plan, and all of them got to the task of bringing in wood, or shaping wood that had already been taken in, or carving up and planning out the design for these ramparts that were to be built. And all in a day's span, these Achaeans had built up that rampart wall, or so the poets tell it. For some believe that it had been there from days and years past, had been worked on for many a time. But whichever be the case, those Achaeans had brought forth a giant project, but in their haste and their nervousness not to be taken unawares by the Trojan hosts, they had forgotten an important thing that would cause them much grief besides. They had forgotten to honor the gods. All right, it got a little stilted sometimes, but still on a pretty good track with the storytelling here. There's a lot of debate, or it's kind of just like generally thought that. So there's a part in Homer's story where he says that the Achaeans basically build this rampart on top of the funeral pyres that they take in from the battlefield, and they build it in a day, this giant wall around their camp, which is obviously very unlikely. I don't think it's even physically possible to do that. And a lot of people think that Homer was probably doing what I had to do in previous episodes when I forgot something from the story, and then I had to go and say, oh crap, well, there has to be a wall by the time we get to this part, so I got to get the wall in there. And Homer just kind of like created this idea that it was built in a day. Not unlikely, I don't think. I mean, it seems pretty likely to me. So in mine, I said that the poets say that it was built in a day, but it might have been built, years before. Who knows? I don't know. That was a little clumsy, but I thought it was kind of cool. I think in one of my earlier episodes, I actually had the ramparts there already. Like I was planning to have it be that they were already built. But I kind of like the section where they build it and they all kind of work together to do that. Yeah, not too much to say about all this, but it was relatively smooth. Obviously, the quality standard overall is still not very good or where I need it to be, but in terms of ones I've done so far, this was one of the better ones, so we'll just hope to keep getting better with it.